Welcome back to Pitcher University, where today we're going to be talking about knowing your strengths as a pitcher and also accepting your role.
So, as a coach, I see a lot of players who come in and they want to learn to throw harder because they're always being compared to other pitchers that they play against or pitchers on their team, and they think that they need to throw hard to be good, but then they end up losing who they are in the process. So, when I was little, that was one thing that I heard a lot is I was never going to throw hard enough and I wasn't going to do this or that. And I was fortunate enough to grow up in Seattle in the late 90s, and the Mariners were actually good then, and they had two pitchers who really stood out. One was Randy Johnson, who many of you know threw 100 plus miles an hour, big strikeout pitcher, had a big name. And then the other one was Jamie Moyer, and he maybe touched 90 on a good day. And he would have his breaking ball that was, low 80s and then a changeup that was low 70s. And he would use his speed to attack hitters in the opposite way. So as he would see hitters get more and more frustrated hitting off of him, he would actually slow his pitches down to beat the hitters that way. So he used more finesse and his lack of speed to beat the best hitters in baseball. And so my dad and I realized, like, hey, I was going to be more of a Jamie Moyer type rather than a Randy Johnson. And once I was able to make that connection in my head, all of a sudden my whole trajectory changed because I realized, like, oh, I didn't have to learn how to throw 60 miles an hour as a freshman. I could work more on spin and finesse to figure out what made me great and help me beat hitters in my own way. So as a coach, I really try to get my girls to understand that because it's hugely important to know who you are, both as a person and as a pitcher. But as a pitcher, you're never going to be successful trying to be something that you're not. And one of my coaches somewhere told me, like, if you're going to fight yourself, you're always going to lose. And we want everybody to be successful. So you have to just accept who you are, even if it's not who you want to be. You can find success in your own way.
I think even adding to that, so you can hear other people comparing yourself to, a different pitcher, but also making sure and checking yourself when you find yourself comparing yourself to another pitcher, because like she was saying, like we all have our strengths, we all have our weaknesses, but that's what makes it cool. And that's what makes it not boring to watch. So just owning what you have and owning your strengths and not looking or comparing yourself to other people is key. And then I think another important thing is also knowing your role as a pitcher on your team. So whether that's starter, relief, closer, whatever it may be, just knowing like what your job is. And if you get a lot of innings, if you don't get a lot of innings, like your job is to just find a way to get batters out and help your team out. You do your job, that's awesome. Then you're out, then you cheer on the next person. So I feel like that should always be the mindset.
It's important to know also, like, just because you're not a starter doesn't mean that a reliever or a closer is lesser
Mhm.
than a starter. Like, every one of those roles is equally as important as the others.
Mhm.
They're just different, right?
Mhm.
A reliever is, they're going to come in a tight situation. A closer is going to come in just to close the game out, usually in a close game. And a starter sets the tone. And I mean, I've definitely worked with kids who are only starters. That's all they can do. They can't handle the pressure of a reliever, and vice versa. I have kids who feel like there's way more pressure to start a game because they have to set the tone. They have to, in their mind, that's much more pressure for them and more stress for them. Whereas coming in a reliever situation, that's so easy for them. But then I've had, some of my relievers and they're just like, but I'm not a starter. So, like I never get to start games. I'm like, yeah, but you have the most amount of innings in a weekend, even though you're not starting. Like you are the one that the coaches rely on. They're putting you in these situations, but they also know that, hey, you're not necessarily the best at starting, but we trust you the most when it matters later in the game. So even in that way, like knowing where your strengths are in like being a starter versus a closer, knowing your strength there, knowing what you are most comfortable with, that's only going to help everybody be successful.
Mhm.
There's so many coaches that like have this idea of what a good pitcher is. I mean, I doubt you heard this, but like, not throwing hard enough because you always threw hard. But I mean, you maybe heard it with like accuracy or something. You're
Mhm.
not
Mm.
you don't hit your spots enough to have more innings yet. But we've
I
all
heard
had,
that. That was a wild one.
yeah, you never threw the ball behind a batter twice.
I did
Uh,
that. I did that. Did I do that in college? I might
did
have.
you do that?
I think I did.
I mean, it happens. It happened, right?
Accept
Uh,
it and move on.
yeah, and it's one pitch. It's not the end of the world. But we've all had those coaches tell us like, "Hey, you don't do this well enough, so you're not going to get as many innings." And like, it's so not fair to say that because we all have our weaknesses. So to say like, "Hey, you don't hit your spots well enough," or "Hey, you don't throw hard enough," but you're getting, you know, as good as, if not better results than the other pitchers, that's so not fair. And the coaches, they mean well and they want their pitchers to improve, but then the way they say it makes their pitchers feel less than. So they have to, nothing else matters. Like, okay, you need to be able to hit your spots more. Okay, well, some girls would take that as, okay, so speed doesn't matter. I'm going to slow down just to make sure I can hit my spots. And they're going to lose all the success that they've had, or vice versa with speed. And it's so important for them to realize, and for coaches also to realize, like, how you say things really matters, because sometimes the message gets lost in the words that you use. So if you want your pitcher to be able to hit their spots better, hey, I like what you're doing. Let's work on this a little bit more. We're not going to lose innings, but you could potentially have more innings because you throw less pitches by hitting your spots better, right? That's a totally different message than like, well, you're not going to get as many innings because you're not hitting your spots. So there's just, there's so many layers to this. Like a lot of it is the pitcher and being able to look at, are you comparing yourself to others? Are you saying, I'm not good enough at this, so and I need this part so bad that I have to sacrifice everything else. Like being able to look at it from a more holistic perspective and kind of the entire pitch rather than one part of the pitch, that's going to help everybody be better. And the coaches, like we need coaches to just be a little bit more aware of that, because girls take everything very literally and personally to where it'll be a detriment to everybody. Parents just reminding the girls like, hey, you're doing great. If you want to talk about what you're struggling with, I'm happy to do that. We want the parents, and I mean, really everybody, but parents on the ride home, we're hard on ourselves. We're very hard on ourselves. So we don't necessarily need
Mhm.
other people to be hard on us for us. If you want to talk, let's talk. If you want my opinion, happy to give you my opinion, rather than like, you didn't do this well enough, you didn't do this well enough, because more often than not, that's when girls are going to start to hate the game and they're going to not want to pitch anymore because they're just never good enough in anybody's eyes. And so part of accepting your strengths is having a good support system too.
Mhm. I think one more thing that I did want to add, knowing with your strengths and knowing what kind of pitcher you are. So you might not be a strikeout pitcher that, throws 70 plus and is just striking everybody out left and right. Like I still feel like I was successful just, feeding the defense. Like I let the batters basically hit the ball, let the defense catch it, field a ground ball, throw them out, that type of thing. And that doesn't make me, I don't know what the word, worse. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't
doesn't make you worse.
doesn't make me worse in that aspect. It's just we have different strengths. So I just wanted to add that in there too.
Yeah, that's another great point. Strikeout pitchers are very flashy, just like speed is very flashy, but that doesn't mean it's better. And a lot of times strikeout pitchers, typically rise ball pitchers, so they're also going to give up a lot more home runs, just the nature of the rise ball.
High risk, high rewards.
Exactly. But I mean, just at Cal alone, I can think of two pitchers off the top of my head who lived off their drop ball and changeup who are in the Hall of Fame.
Mhm.
And, at least one of them was a multi-time All-American, and not huge strikeout numbers from them, but very, very good. One of them won a national championship. So you don't need to be a strikeout pitcher to be very successful.
Mhm.
I mean, I love strikeouts, but it's
Mhm.
not my
I know.
job.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, end of the day, you have to be able to look yourself in the mirror and accept who you are, build on that, right? Like, build up who you are. And at the same time, we want to strengthen your weaknesses. Like, we want to be very well rounded, but lean into your natural strengths and what you just kind of find easy and brings you the most success. Moral of the story.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week.
Bye.